Joey, do you have a hard copy of the agenda table of contents?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Just want to check something on Zoom to make sure we're still running properly.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call this regular council meeting to order at 4 o'clock. Council would like to acknowledge the Ucluelet on whose traditional territories the District of Ucluelet operates. Audience members and delegates are advised that this proceeding is being video recorded and broadcast on YouTube and Zoom, which may store data on foreign servers. There is one late item. Does all of council have that item? I'd like to move that we accept this item 1.1 under 11.1 of our agenda, which is the ACRD launching a solid waste survey with movie night for the public. Do I have a seconder?
So moved.
Councillor Anderson. All in favor? None opposed? And that carries. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Councillor Hoare. Nobody wants to second that?
I'll second it.
Councillor Kennington. All in favor? None opposed, and that carries. The next item is 4.1, September 26th, 2023 regular minutes. Are there any errors or omissions? Councillor Hoare looks like she has something.
Yes, I just got to find it. Sorry. That's crap. Sorry. Page 8 of the agenda. I believe towards the bottom. Sorry, waiting for something to load. It says firefighter suites. I believe it should be suits.
Good catch.
Come on. Opening. Also page 11. The last line doesn't make a complete amount of sense. Sorry, finding it.
Under Councillor Kennington's report?
Yes, he also noted funding opportunities coming online that the district must be positioned to access, maybe positioned or in a position to access. I feel like there's
Some words missing.
some words missing. Yeah, that's it.
Okay. May I have a motion to adopt the minutes as amended?
So moved.
Councillor Anderson?
I'll second it.
Councillor Hoare? All in favor? None opposed, that carries. All right, we have one delegation this afternoon. Our delegates are Andrea Blakeman, David Brooks, Bob Moss, and Ed Main. Welcome. The floor is yours. It's just a little switch on the side, I think.
This side, I think. No, maybe not.
Sounds like it.
How about that?
That sounds good.
Okay. Good afternoon, Your Worship and councillors. Thank you so much for having us today. We're very excited to be here. On behalf of the Bolinas Housing Society, we'd very much like to acknowledge and gratefully appreciate that we live and work on many unceded traditional lands and homelands of Indigenous people across Vancouver Island, each with their own unique traditions, history, and culture. So here we're going to tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do. Let's see if this is going to work, Joey.
Just let me know when you like.
Okay. Worked before, now it's not. Okay, so a little bit wordy. The short version is of this is that we were founded in 1990. Originally, it was an offshoot of the United Church that was very concerned about working in the community and doing something good. Long since then, we are now, we were Nanaimo Affordable. But, Bolinas is a nonprofit registered charity, and we're governed by a committed and diverse volunteer board, 3 of whom are with you today. Since 1996, which is approximately 6 years that it took to build our first housing project, we were just a society figuring out how to do that. So we started off with 17 townhomes that were family townhomes, which we still have on Pine Street in Nanaimo. And that project, like many of our other projects that are rent geared to income, or 30%, approximately 30% of people's annual income, have 60-year housing agreements with BC Housing, which is how they stay affordable. Next slide, please. Thank you. Over the years, we've evolved our mission to what it is today, to develop well-maintained housing for people with low to moderate incomes while promoting inclusive and diverse communities. That is very much true, and our communities pick a background, and in our 850 plus units, you will find a family, a person from that background. It's an extremely diverse portfolio that we have of tenants. Our vision is providing innovative and viable housing options for future generations. So when we do planning, we're not talking about 5 years from now, we're talking about 50 years from now or 100 years from now. We want to build our communities right across the island. We believe basic right includes housing, and tenants, or residents as we usually call them, should be treated with dignity and respect. Everybody deserves a well-maintained home that's affordable, independent, secure, and that really promotes a sense of community and security. So, well, Joey, thank you. I'm going to give up with the little guy here. Who do we serve? Currently, over 850 homes, which includes approximately 1,200 residents, with another 153 units that are just finishing up. In fact, last Friday we were just granted occupancy to those 53 units. Low to moderate income independent seniors, people with disabilities and families. Mix of rental rates, so everything from what some folks call shelter rates, or what was $375 until recently for a 1-bedroom unit, now $500. Rent geared to income, which has those long-term, usually 60-year subsidy arrangements with BC Housing to keep them affordable, and that's usually around 30% of someone's annual income. Or low end of market. So low end of market can be 10%, 15%, and over time more below market. Changing our name. You may have heard of Nanaimo Affordable Housing. As we grew, that didn't make any sense because we weren't just working in Nanaimo. So probably 3 to 4 years ago, that conversation started and took a long time and a lot of iterations, a lot of names. We came up with Bolinas, which really fit who we are and where we're located in the world. So it had a lot of names. In fact, our former chair, who was often on our board chair for probably 15 years, finally came up with this name, and it stuck. And we've all really, it wasn't designed, or it wasn't coined from this information that you're seeing here about whales on the West Coast, but it really stood for where we are and who we are. We're sort of the backbone of our housing community, certainly in Nanaimo. Some of our properties, currently we've got approximately 20 properties. So over the last decade, we've received quite a number of awards and certainly have some fabulous looking buildings. And most often, our new builds are the nicest building in the whole community, in that neighborhood, by a long shot. People, come in with, oh, you're bringing in those folks. Well, when you see our buildings and you meet our tenants, that sort of speaks for itself. So what you'll see on the far left there, on the upper left corner of your page, is one of our newest, largest seniors buildings. That's 159 units of seniors. It has a commercial kitchen in it, so a dining hall, an activity space. Rents range there from $500 to $1,600, and the size of the units vary accordingly. So what you're seeing here, bottom right-hand corner, is our very, very first property. That's our family unit that you saw on the first slide. That is the 17 units of family housing that still exists today. So they're all townhomes. We can't do it alone. We couldn't do what we do without partners, and that means BC Housing can be a funding partner. We have Island Health that supports some of our programming for our tenants. Haven Society helps women fleeing violence and women and families fleeing violence. Nanaimo Association for Community Living, for Community Living, and many other societies. I'll not list them because they're listed here. Various negotiated agreements with established organizations mean discounted costs for residents. So, for example, something we negotiated about almost 5 years ago, which was with what was Shaw, was very discounted rates for internet, cable, and phone. So we passed that along to our tenants, and that was amazing, especially during COVID, when people really were isolated. So those that wouldn't necessarily afford those services would have them as part of their rent. So other partners include Island Health, CMHC, municipalities, regional districts, and private donors. Less than 25% of our income is provided through government funding, and in most cases would be BC Housing. So the rest of our portfolio is funded internally, predominantly from rent. So we are a business. We're just a nonprofit business. Thank you. So we're asking you not to believe what we're telling you here today. We actually like to invite you to come see what we do. Come see our buildings. Come bump into a few of our tenants. Don't take our word for it. Extending an invitation, which we've done on many occasions. So if you're willing to do that, we'll set a date. You come down and visit us, and we'll show you around, and you can see for yourselves. So we'll have a Q&A, and before we do that, David Brooks is going to come up and share a little bit of extra thoughts with you.
Thank you. Worship councillors, thank you for having us here today. We really appreciate it. At Bolinas Housing Society, as Andrea said, we're reaching out to different communities on the island, and we're trying to extend our reach a bit, not for personal gain, obviously. None of us are paid anything. We don't make any money out of this. But we see a dire need for housing for low to moderate income families in many communities on the island. So we're looking to expand and help those communities as best we can. And we know communities like Ucluelet that have are more remote, perhaps from the mainstream, have some more difficult problems than others, perhaps, than Nanaimo even has, in housing their people. And we know there's a need for housing here, and we'd like to see what we can do to help you solve that issue if we can. The group of us were up here, I believe it was about 6 or 7 weeks ago now, and had the pleasure of touring the property just over here where the water tower is that's city owned, and we see potential there. We've developed properties like that in the past, and we'd like to perhaps do something with you if it's feasible for us and for you. We'd like to propose a path forward if we can, put out an ask to you and see what your response is. We don't need the response today, obviously, and as Andrea said, we'd appreciate it if you could come down and see what we do and see the quality of the housing that we put up for people and how we operate. At Bolinas, we own our properties. The society owns the properties, and we operate the properties. Sometimes still in conjunction with others, but that's sort of phasing out of our portfolio. In order to do something here, particularly, we need to take advantage of economies of scale. So if we were to come in here, we would want to go in initially with a phase of perhaps 80 units to start. And that's just a figure we throw out there, but it would only be one phase of perhaps many. It could be a smaller phase to start. It depends on a lot of factors, of course. One of the largest obstacles for not-for-profit housing societies such as our own is the cost of delivering that housing, and the cost of housing here is high. We realize that. And the land costs, the site servicing, construction costs, and certainly financing for us are all a big deal. For us, we don't have a pot of cash that we're sitting on. We operate on a budget. As Andrea said, only 25% of our funding comes from government sources. The rest of it's all rent generated for the most part, and it's a balanced budget every year. There's no big surplus or anything like that we can throw out there to build something for a community such as yours. So what we're looking for is some sort of horse trading here so that we could get something going for you if we can. What we would propose to the District of Euclid is that you service and rezone the property for us and agree to transfer the title to us. We realize that may be a big ask, but in exchange for that, we would endeavor to provide the housing that we feel desperately need. We have talked to people in the community, and we realize that there is a need here, and it's quite serious. We would further ask that we would provide a covenant, of course, to provide such housing in exchange for the transfer of title and the servicing. We would also ask that the district not charge any other fees or other charges for approval of development or construction. Any money out of our pocket takes away from our ability to provide housing. It's as simple as that. If you want $100,000 from us, it's $100,000 less in housing you get at the end of the day. So we need your contribution to the project as well if it's to succeed. If the district is prepared to make such a commitment to us, we will make a commitment to you. And the commitment from us will be to endeavor to provide that housing to you. We will commence our due diligence as soon as humanly possible. We will take preliminary design feasibility analysis all at our cost. Our target would be to bring forward a specific proposal to you within 4 to 6 months. And that's a feasible goal for us. The reason we want to do that is because a lot of our housing, as Andrea said, comes from BC Housing. And they do calls for proposals to societies like us on a fairly regular basis. It's not every year at a certain time, but there are calls coming up. There's one currently that we're working towards with a couple of projects. And we anticipate one coming again perhaps in the spring of 2024. And we would like to, if we can, be ready to put the Ucluelet proposal into that call for proposals and hopefully get funding. Now, there's no guarantee, of course. Every society of our nature in BC puts proposals in that they want to get funding for, and many are put in and few are chosen. But we've been very successful. As you've seen, we've had several very successful projects in recent years. They're beautiful buildings. They're really something to see in person. And we would hope that our reputation would carry weight and that we would be able to push forward with your project if it's something you wish to pursue. That's the urgency from our perspective, is that, you know, if we can get a quick response, we can do our work quickly, we could get into the next call, or we may be delayed a further year down the road to get funding out of the government. And we may be delayed that long anyway if we're not accepted in the first go-around. But we don't want to delay any more than is necessary. And it is a year-to-year thing. It's not happening multiple times every year. So we want to get into the next go-around if we can. We'd be pleased to answer any questions you have about any of that. If I can't answer them, Andrea certainly can, and or one of the others. We're happy to entertain any questions from any of you.
Thank you. Any questions from council? Councillor Kennington?
Yeah, through the mayor. You mentioned 80 units, and I'm wondering, is that a number based on what pencils out, or is that based on what an identified need in the community? Because that's a lot of absorption for a project in a town this size. So
We haven't identified the specific need in the community, but I believe it far exceeds 80 units. I think we could go up the highway a bit and perhaps find 80 people in no time at all that would want a place to live. But it's something that we see as perhaps a number that is feasible for us to do economically. If we were to try and build 24 units, the expense would be through the roof per unit. 80 units is something that we just throw out there as a number. It could be 100 units, but it's something that perhaps is something we can deal with. Andrea wants to say something as well.
Oops. Your worship and council members. In addition to that, from an operational perspective, which is how I always look, 24 units is almost impossible to find staff to operate it. 80 units is a full-time job. So it's not just about the costs. Yes, certainly the costs come down the larger the building, but it's an operational thing. So there's a lot, and it's not just thrown out there. It's a educated guess, but it's a great question.
I have a follow-up question, if I may, through the mayor. So with 80 units, does that, I know some of it has to do with economies of scale when you're actually building, but from an operational standpoint, can it be spread over a few smaller properties? Should we not have something quite big enough? Like, can we still make that work if we have some duplexes, townhouses, and apartment building all under one operation?
Do you mean all in the same site?
No, I mean spread out
Spread
through
over
a
the
couple of
community.
sites, potentially.
I think that makes it much more difficult.
Well, from a cost perspective, duplexes and things like that are prohibitively difficult to build. I mean, townhomes generally, even if you've got 12 of them, is extremely expensive to build relative to a box. I mean, it's just an efficiency. Yourself can probably think that one through in about 7 seconds. It's about efficiencies of scale, and operationally, the more dense, the easier it is to manage. Could it be done, 24 units here and 30 units there? Sure. 24 units here, 30 units 50 kilometers from now, from here, that makes it much more challenging. So yes and no.
We just opened a development in Parksville, right behind the Quality Foods. I don't know if you folks are familiar with where the new Quality Foods is on Highway 4, but right behind it is a big white building that we just put up. And we put up 11 townhomes? 8 townhomes, I'm sorry. And Andrea can tell you about the cost efficiencies there.
So the 79 units of 1 and 2 bedroom with balconies, fabulous. Beautiful views, ocean views here and glacial views there. The townhomes were about a third of the cost of the 79 units. You can do the math.
Mhm.
It's extremely, yeah, the 8 units cost about 1/3 of the 79 units. Like, it's that significant. I'll go back to my previous comment. Come visit us. We'll show you. We'll show you Parksville too.
Yeah, sorry, through the mayor, the concern for me is not, the scale or density. It's do we have an appropriate piece of land that we could make this work for you as well as us. So I'm not trying to poo-poo any of the ideas that are coming forth. It's just the
That, of course,
reality
would
of
be
our
part
partnership.
that would be part of our due diligence, of course, looking at the piece of land in question. We've only briefly walked up part of it, so it's hard to say from our perspective whether it's feasible on that site to put up a single building of that size or not. Our hope is that, we could do something on that land, and perhaps there's other land I'm not aware of, but that's the one we've been shown. And subject to looking at it and having somebody with the expertise to look at it and give us an opinion on what we could do, we really can't say. Our hope is that we could do something along this sort of scale, though.
Okay, thank you.
And do you sometimes work with a developer that is sort of halfway through their process and would love to have a partner with an organization like you to come on board and build and manage an apartment building?
We sort of you're thinking of what we sometimes call shovel ready.
Yes.
We have just finished 2 projects like that. In fact, our Parksville project was that. It was a shovel-ready project that we put forward jointly together to a BC Housing proposal call. And the 53 units referred to here that we just got occupancy for last Friday was the same. So yes, that is something that we would consider.
That's good to know. We have several projects that are in various stages of beginning and not going very fast, very far.
And just to be not clear, but just in those situations, from an operational perspective, we've done this for 35 years almost, and I've done this for a long time. There's 101 little tiny things that make a big difference at the construction stage that make operational sense for the long term. Dollars and cents as opposed and in addition to cents for the tenants. So that's the reason that we want to get in as early as possible to partner up and work with them collaboratively to get to the right product at the end of the day.
Great. Yeah, the property that you're considering up past the water tower, it's unserviced and it's very rocky. So servicing would be costly, and I see that that's a cost that the district would bear. So I'm just thinking there might be some other partners that you could work with that have service lots already that maybe are sort of poised and ready to go. Just a thought.
We didn't walk the full property, but it seemed to me that the property on the far side may be more amenable to building and servicing. But the access to it from that side, I understand you can't get in. It would have to come off of Short or something like that to get into it. So it may be a matter of getting a road around a little bit, but we're just not sure what's there at this stage. So we're looking just to see. But we're prepared to, if you're prepared to commit to us, we're prepared to commit to do the feasibility study out of our pocket to see if it'll fly.
That'd be part of your due diligence, I guess. Yes. Any other questions from council? Councillor Anderson?
Yeah, thank you for being here, and through the mayor, I just had a quick question. Did I understand that you were saying you were getting out of the management side of this? So that would be my question is, in the case of, say, like the 80 units by the water tower, would the management and the vetting and of the potential residents, that's not...
No, I believe you misheard me. We're not getting out of the management of...
Okay.
We run all of the buildings that we own.
Okay. And you guys do that, Bolinas does that then themselves?
We run and operate. We develop and operate. The confusion probably is that we have been asked on many occasions to do property management for other societies. We no longer do that. We do that for one society. We don't do that any longer. So
Okay, just your own buildings, right?
just our own buildings.
Okay.
Yeah.
I believe I did say that we're phasing out working with other people in operating properties because we want to own and operate them all. It's much more efficient for us. And we do screen all our tenants. It's a very thorough process. We have taken over other societies in the past. We've acquired properties that have had huge problems with drugs, prostitution, that type of thing, that have taken a lot of energy and effort on behalf of our staff to tidy up and deal with. We're now very careful about how we operate things, and we've acquired several older properties that we're refurbishing as well, but our path forward is mainly new construction, and we hope to be able to do that here.
Right. Excellent, thank you. Yeah, it sounds like we need to go on a field trip.
Well, interestingly enough, 4 of the 5 of us will be in Nanaimo in 2 weeks' time for the VAIA conference. So we may give you a ring and see if we can do a little tour.
We'd be pleased to show you around. We've got several properties in Nanaimo that we could show you.
Oh, Councillor Mafty has a question.
Yes, through the mayor, I just wanted to thank you for your presentation. I was really looking forward to this. Obviously, housing is an issue that we discuss all the time. One of the questions that I have is specific to the sort of vetting process, and it's especially relevant when you're talking about 80 units. One of my concerns from conversations that I've had is that without a good way of making sure that units constructed are inhabited by residents in search of affordable housing, we're just trying to grow ourselves out of a problem, and we create 80 units and we see a few people currently living locally housed, and then we attract a whole bunch of other people. And I was wondering if you could give me some perspective based on your past experience with projects that you've already completed. What would you suggest as the right approach to try to make sure that the greatest proportion of that housing actually ends up housing people who currently live in the community?
Great question, and through Mayor to Council, but we've had that question many times, and we've had that issue a number of times. And so what we've evolved is that when we vet a tenant, it is a 4 to 6 hour process per possible applicant. So, I mean, it's easy to weed out initially. You're from Ontario? No. You're coming in from, I don't care what country, that's not who we house. So we have quite specific criteria, and one of our criteria, especially when it came to for example, Parksville, you need to have been living in the area for X amount of time. That's the first thing. We have references, we have character references, we also have work references. It's a very, very encompassing process to take on a new tenant, because it's not just one building, because we have so many units and we have a large portfolio that ranges from shelter rates so right now $500 all the way to $2,200, I guess, is probably our largest, and everything in between. We might interview 3 people for 1 unit, let's just say, for example, and I want to live in that particular building. Well, actually, that isn't a good building for you, so we offer them, this isn't a suitable arrangement for you, but we have these others as options. So we have a choice, generally choices, but having people from the community first was our priority in Parksville, and that's what we're doing. So we're about 60% rented in our Parksville, 65% rented, and we're about 2.5 months into occupancy. We have 400 people still on the waiting list. So it's a long, slow process, but it's a really important process because it's about, this is the community that are going to live here. These people potentially are going to, this is our last place they're going to live. potentially. So we want to make sure we get it right. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I have lots of follow-up questions, but what I wanted to know is there a process, and do you find that it works, and have you had success with it? And in that regard, it sounds like you've certainly answered my question. And then the only follow-up to that I would have is I wonder if 80 units is too big of a project for a town the size of Ucluelet. I completely understand the economy of scale, and none of your points were lost on me. But I think it would be an unfortunate situation to commit to a large project and then sort of insist on prioritizing current local residents and then end up only filling a portion of the building. And I think we need to do some research before we figure out what that number is. And at that point, it may just be that this isn't feasible. But my gut feeling is that 80 units is a pretty big project for a community of our size, especially given how sort of specialized the niche is here. And so I'm wondering if you have an idea of like what's a minimum that you can say, okay, we can work with this, rather than it's just not worth it. Like what's the smallest number of units that you think makes sense to make a go of it?
Very, very difficult question to ask, because it's the construction numbers and the operational piece of it go together, but very loosely. And this is very preliminary. So without asking a whole lot of questions on our side, it might be a phase project. It might be, for argument's sake, say 40 now and 40 in 5 years. Those are all possibilities, and we did that. That very large building, the 159 unit, was actually 2 phases that were put together. So phase projects are very doable.
What happens if you start with 40 and it's, like those 40 fill up but barely just, and there's no real appetite for phase 2? What happens then, hypothetically speaking?
We would stay with the 40. But we would look to you, I think, to tell us what the need is. We're not members of the community, obviously, and you would have a better feel than we do as to what the need is here. And, we know that there could be people who are specific Ucluelet people who have lived here for years and need affordable housing, but there could also be people who have come to work here and have long-term jobs but haven't been here for a long time as well, that would be certainly considered as applicants for housing. There could be different ways of filling a building up, I'm sure, and there's probably a lot of need. It's just a matter of whether people qualify too.
Sure. Thank you for your time and for the information.
Thanks, Councillor Mafty. Follow up to that, do you provide accommodation for seasonal workers at all? What does that look like?
We've been asked that many, many times, and we have partners in other parts of the island that have lots of seasonal workers here, seasonal being 2 years, often very long. That's not something that we've done prior, but what I was going to just say, this is done collaboratively with you. This isn't just about us. It also is about you. If it doesn't work for you, this isn't going to work at all. So those are all things to explore. And if that's something that's needed, and I've heard that in other communities, that's a huge need, that's something to consider. How do we make that work? Just because we haven't done it before doesn't mean we can't do it.
Okay, thank you.
We've also done housing for police, firefighters, that type of thing. We've housed them. It's based on income, of course, but still, we know there's a need for people like them that come into the community who haven't been here before or don't have a history with the community, and maybe transferred out as well a few years down the road. So that type of professional we've certainly dealt with. We currently in Parksville, I think, we're dealing with that. So seasonal workers, certainly hotel workers, that's something that could be, I'm sure, worked out.
Great, thank you. If there's no other questions from council, Councillor Kennington, you had a motion you wanted to make?
No, not necessarily.
No?
I'm just wondering what next steps would be as far as moving forward to talking about
Moving
it.
forward, we would look for the commitment from council and the community just to, with respect to the land and the charges we've talked about, and then we can fly at it. Really, it's something that we would like to proceed with quickly, as I said earlier. So the sooner we hear from you, the sooner we can move on it as well.
Perhaps I'll look to Mr. Lawrence for a comment.
I think the for council and staff would be to for staff to have a conversation with the Bolinas group, and then we can bring something back to council if it pans out. But the first thing for us to do is to really look at what the proposal is, have that discussion, look at what the land and the servicing costs are, as well as the need. I know there is the housing needs assessment has identified, I think, quite a few people that are in need that are couch surfing. So I think we could probably end up filling quite a large development. But that is something that we'd need to look into and then report back to council.
So you don't need anything from us at this point?
I don't think so. Council can refer it back to staff in a motion if they so choose, but or you can leave it with staff and we'll talk to the Bolinas group. I
think that will work perfectly. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you for your time, for coming out here. And as I said, we'll be in Nanaimo the 24th, 25th, 23rd, 24th, something like that. So 2 hours. Okay. We'll take a look at the schedule. There's contact information on this form for you, is there? I can get it from Joey. That's okay. All right.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And you don't have to stay for the rest of the meeting if you don't want to. Bye.
I did, and I've put her in touch with another fellow who's gonna. I work. Yeah.
Well, there goes our entire audience.
I promise I brushed my teeth.
All right, moving along. Is there any unfinished business? We have one bylaw item today. It's 7.1 zoning amendment and DVP for 256 Matterson Drive. This item will be presented by the Director of Community Planning, Mr. Gregg.
There we go. Thank you, through Mayor and Council. So this is a an application. Here, let's advance this. There we go. So 256 Matterson Drive. There's a zoning amendment and variance component to this. This is really a property. There's some interesting history to this. So 256, you'll see at the image on the left side of the screen here. The existing house, which we're not sure the date of it, it was built some decades ago, certainly prior to 1991. That was sort of the first permit we have some records of. So it was built years ago, spanning the property line between two parcels of land. So the owner owns these two lots that are existing, and the house that sits across of those lots. And you can see the photo on the right. Essentially, the property line runs essentially through the middle of the house. It sort of cuts through. which is, fine. And this is not the only property in Ucluelet that was constructed this way. That back in the day, okay, well, land was cheap, need a larger yard, garden, whatever. Like, okay, so this works, and so they built a house and they used more than one defined parcel, and that was fine. So the owner of the property, sees this and has requested that we essentially move the lot line, and the process for that is a subdivision. So it redefines the parcels. So currently there are 2 parcels. In the end, there would be 2 parcels. It's essentially moving the lot line over. And so this graphic kind of explains that. The dashed line would be the existing lot line, and they're proposing to move it over so that the existing house would sit on its lot and be clear of that property line. And it would create a narrower lot to the west and allow for a 5-foot setback to the existing house, essentially. So an infill lot, but really it's starting with 2, ending with 2, but still technically it's a subdivision of land to do that. So a narrower lot, certainly, but something that is buildable. So the application, the zoning component of it would be what's requested is an amendment to the zoning to allow the smaller lot size. As well, there would be a variance to the frontage. Instead of 10 meters, in order to allow a 5-foot setback to the existing property, we would shave 16 inches, I believe, off of it. So it would be 9.59 meters would be the frontage of it. So this would then enable that what otherwise is sort of extra garden space could be used for more housing, essentially. The other portion of the variance that would be in the council motion would be to consider the first and second reading of the zoning amendment that's been drafted and refer it to a public hearing, but also getting input on variances that would be required. So the varying the frontage was one piece that I mentioned, and the other would be around the servicing, because typically subdivision triggers the servicing of new lots, and our somewhat old subdivision standards bylaw we call for curb, gutter, sidewalk, whereas our OCP really suggests that a one-sided pathway of the Matterson coast-to-coast connection, which is referred to in your report, would be appropriate, rather than building just one little piece of it. Cash in lieu is what's being suggested, and for that pathway, so that when we're ready to do the whole block, that it would be part of the sort of contributing towards the financing of that, but that would require a variance as well. There's also mention of a motion around the 10% of the perimeter. The council motion is also required on the frontage. That would happen down the road after a public hearing. We would bring that back to get that council motion to enable the subdivision to go forward. Again, if there's support for the other pieces, but there isn't a need for that council motion now. It would be really prior to sort of final approval of the zoning and the variances. There's some reference to, the official community plan has some very supportive policies around infill. Generally, it's we compare these to, okay, well, what could be built under the existing zoning and the existing property configuration? If the owner were to remove or knock down the house that's there, you could build 2 houses of almost 3,000 square feet each under the R1 zoning. They could do an addition if the lot line weren't, if they were to consolidate them and make it one large lot, you could do an addition and end up with about a 5,900 square foot house on that property. So, there are certain, the existing zoning and configuration would allow additional density. What's being proposed would allow more dwellings. And I would just note that the zoning that is being proposed does not allow for short-term accommodation. It really would be small house, potentially a suite or an ADU. They would have to figure out the design and all the challenges of working with a narrow lot to make all that happen, but this is sort of setting them up for potentially doing that. Beyond that, I would see just if there are any questions, and I'm not sure if the applicant is online and wish to speak. I think it indicated they'd be interested in that, but I'm not sure if they're there.
Any questions from council?
Just a point of clarification. In the letter to from the applicant, it actually references R5 zoning. Is that just a typo and they meant R6?
Through the mayor, often an applicant will ask for one thing, and then we get into a discussion of, okay, what are you trying to achieve, and then we'll advise on and then draft the zoning accordingly. I think there was an assumption that the R5 zoning would fit and would work, and which we sort of talked about the uses. The R6 or the single family component, works best. So that's what we've drafted and brought forward. The intent was to create this lot, and the R6 fits the closest, I'd say.
Any other questions? Councillor Anderson?
No, I just had a comment, really. I had to read this one a couple of times to get my head around it, and I thought it was a pretty creative solution because I know for both the applicant and the district, there's a lot of boxes that got checked here. So I know that there was some difficulties upstream of this, and it seems like this actually is a pretty neat solution, actually, for both with the infill and its proximity to the village center, and the idea of having the sort of coast to coast walkway. So, yeah, no, I thought, at first I was concerned, and I think we chatted about it, and I was like, actually, this really makes sense for the direction that we want to go with density and infill. So I was just going to say, good job on that.
Councillor Kennington, anything?
No, I ran the numbers, and it definitely fits a unit. So
Of some size.
I have a design ready already.
Perfect. Councillor Mafty, anything from you?
Am I unmuted now? You guys can hear me?
Yes.
I looked it over, and I don't have any objections. Ultimately, the vote is to see it go to public hearing. I'd be surprised if there was significant pushback during a public hearing process, but I'd certainly support this moving ahead to that stage as presented. I see it as a creative solution. It's kind of a funny one, but yeah, I have no issues.
Great, thank you. All right. There is a recommendation, if someone would like to move that.
I'll move that.
Councillor
I'll move
Kennington?
that council, with regard to the proposed change in zoning designation of the western part of 256 Madison Drive for the proposed subdivision, give first and second reading to District of Ucluelet zoning amendment bylaw number 1335, 2023, and direct staff to give notice for public hearing to receive input on the bylaw and development variance permit DVP 23-12.
I'd be happy to second that.
Councillor Mafty seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed? That carries. There is one report item on today's agenda, 8.1 Port Albion Road Water Service Application. This item will be presented by the Director of Engineering Services, Mr. McIntosh. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. As mentioned, the purpose of this report is to ask for Council's direction concerning a recent water service application located on Port Albion Road. The applicant is asking to modify municipal infrastructure to subdivide their land. District staff have informed the applicant on the conditions and municipal requirements in order to achieve their water connection and approval. The applicant has provided alternative designs and asked for approval as well. At this point, staff have thoroughly reviewed the application, and just a couple of key points keep rising to the top for us when considering this application. The first is that their design and application has been reviewed by our external engineering professional consulting firm, Coors and Associates, once on behalf of the applicant and then once on behalf of the district as well. So Coors completed a water model capacity assessment commissioned by the applicant. It was determined that there wasn't enough capacity fronting the property and that the other line available was unsuitable for human consumption without considerable upgrade. As well, Coors reviewed it for the district, as mentioned, and their professional advice was that it should be revised to include the installation of a flush device at the end of the line. So installing that flush device at the end of the line would ensure that once complete, the project was safe, the modification was fully complete, and that the line was activated for current and future users. The second point of consideration that rises to the top for district staff is that the applicant is requesting alteration to municipal district-owned infrastructure. And in our Waterworks bylaw number 1136 states that connection to the district system shall be of a specification as may be prescribed by the district. So we're not being kind of given that liberty in this application. The third is that district staff have offered and suggested a couple of design modifications as well as cost recovery options for the applicant to consider. The design alterations at this point have been considered determined by the applicant and the district as too costly and in some cases impractical for their best purposes. And the cost recovery options offered to the applicant are an opportunity for the applicant to receive latecomer fees, as they would be a newcomer from other users that would come online later. So the applicant has declined those opportunities. The fourth and last consideration when considering this application is that the flush valve at the end of the line, the district requirement is that it would also receive the highest environmental protection. So installing it at the end of the line would trigger a review from Ministry of Environment and perhaps a permit from Department of Fisheries and Oceans as well. So that would ensure that it received considerable oversight from those agencies responsible for protecting the environment. And we recommend that. So just briefly, pros and cons summary here. The staff required conditions would activate a utility that serves the entire area. And once installed, it would be complete and full and complete and safe. It would receive oversight from the agencies responsible for protecting the environment. And once complete, it would have low uncertainties. It would not require any further modifications, any further costs, and any further requirements. The applicant is requesting a design that will benefit 1 to 2 properties. It would receive less oversight from those agencies responsible for protecting the environment. It would create uncertainties for the district, and it would receive, if others wanted to tap into it, further modifications, further costs, further complications at a later date. So, with all that said, Council, I'm available to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. McIntosh. Questions?
Sure. I
Councillor
have one.
Councillor Kennington?
Through the mayor, when talking about the environmental concerns, it's my understanding that with the connection that he's requesting, there's no environmental oversight required because it's not actually identified as a riparian or fish-bearing stream, and what's being proposed by us as the district, or not us, I guess I'm not part of that, but is that we would be pushing it to an environmentally sensitive area and then requesting permits. So I'm just sort of wondering what the logic behind that is as using it for an argument.
Through the mayor. Yes, so installing the flush device and putting water in a permanent and automatic manner in front of the applicant's home would be putting water into an unregistered ditch that eventually makes its way to the harbor irregardless. And so it would require less oversight, effectively doing the same thing, is our opinion. And so installing it at the end of the line would require oversight from the Ministry of Environment and as well as Department of Fisheries and Oceans. So they would probably require that the water, for example, be dechlorinated. A part of their permit would require some riprap, some additional considerations. They would have oversight to ensure that that's the safest way to do that. So we're recommending that we go through that process and complete this job in a fulsome manner.
Okay. Follow up through the mayor. Would a report by a qualified environmental professional to assess the flush valve in front of his house not be sufficient to alleviate those concerns about it making its way to the eventual where we're saying it's going to go? Because is there any is there any proof that that's what's going to happen? Because I just want to get, a professional's opinion on environmentally, if he did it in front of his house, would that in fact be a negative impact?
Through the mayor. So the applicant, of course, has hired a firm to have their preferred option engineered and considered, and so the professionals on that side include professional engineers, biologists, etc. And so they're, of course, working on behalf of the applicant and are promoting that direction, if you will. And so if the district was to also, let's say, hire a firm as well to design with sort of equal measure a flush valve at the end of the line, it would also include professional engineering and biologists to sort of verify and ensure the safety of that. So I'm by no means an environmental professionalist, so I wouldn't speak on that behalf. But yep, all water flows to the ocean and the harbor there eventually, and one requires oversight and one doesn't. So that's the perspective that we're taking here today.
I understand that. I'm just, in all cases, when we're saying that the applicant has hired a firm to do this report, you're insinuating bias, and that's generally every landowner that commissions a report for their property to go for a development permit. It's the same thing. So we accept it from all the developments in town, and we're saying it might be problematic for this one situation. So I just want to be clear, like all of these decisions are made based on the advice of professional biologists, engineers, because that's not who we are. We just have to base everything on the data and the facts. And so I'm a little confused as to what the data is telling us for what he's requesting. If we're not going to accept the design that he's had commissioned, why not?
I think a lot of it has to do with not putting the flush valve in the middle of a line. Rather, it needs to be at the end. Is that correct?
Through the mayor, yes, that's correct. So for all of these developmental service engineering reviews, or for a large portion of them, we refer these out to our external professional engineering firm, Coors and Associates, and they provide advice based on their experience, what they believe will be in the best interest of the district, and so we've relied on that service, the district, now for about 28 years, and so this applicant is not dissimilar from any other applicant that's requesting modifications to the public infrastructure. We've done the same. We've taken the application, the design, we've sent it to our external consulting review, and what they provided is a very clear, conclusive, multiple opinion that putting the flush valve in front of the applicant's home isn't in the district's best interest.
Thank you for clarifying everything.
Other questions? Councillor Mafty?
Yeah, I have one quick question. It's fairly specific. In the sort of pro cons chart here, one of the issues that was raised with installing the flush valve in front of the applicant's house is that it would need to be relocated with future service connections. From what I understand, the only way that would happen is if one of the other property owners wanted to do that, in which case it would be their issue at their expense, and it would come up as its own application, at which point we could judge the merits of that later on down the road. Is that a correct interpretation?
Through the mayor, yep, that's absolutely correct. So installing the flush valve midway serves 1 to 2 properties on Port Albion Road, and it would keep the remainder of the line contaminated, full of bacteria, and unsuitable for consumption. So yes, absolutely right. If next year, if in 10 years, if in 20 years, that local water service area, ACRD Area C, were to open up, change, evolve, and anyone who was to request additional services, they in the district would be going through a similar process with additional costs, additional considerations, and staff are of the opinion that when there's an opportunity to upgrade the infrastructure, it's always best to do it complete, full, and once.
I agree, but in this case, again, correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding, and I'm thinking back to the original meeting where the applicant came in, I mean, this is something that, you know, no one's touched it for years, and now he's saying, hey, I want to do this, I'm going to pay for it, this is what I'd like to do. I don't necessarily understand why this is a district priority at this point. Like, if this is what he wants to do, and there's no immediate or obvious cost to the district to let him do it, and any cost later on down the road is going to be borne by somebody else, I'm just having trouble wrapping my head around why we would make it difficult for this guy to do something that makes a lot of sense right now, based on the argument that it might not make sense in the future if somebody else wants to expand, in which case they'd be responsible for paying for it. Like, aren't we just making this guy pay a whole bunch of extra money and make it more difficult for him based on a hypothetical later on down the road?
Through the mayor. So there's part of this scenario in the ACRD Area C with this water service agreement that was initiated that sort of facilitated if a line was ever to be installed on Port Albion Road or anywhere in ACRD Area C, that the district's required to provide water services to up to 150 homes in the ACRD Area C. And so what we're seeing is now just the first applicant tap into that service. And so BC Hydro has installed a service line that runs down that full line, and the district doesn't have comprehensive land use plans from the ACRD Area C in that area that really informs what's happening in that area. And so there's a little bit of risk for the district as we start to encourage, open up, and promote that area for water services that's outside of the district boundaries. So that said, that agreement is in place, and we're of the position that while there's an opportunity and someone is wanting to activate that line, it's in the district's best interest to fully activate it, fully make it available.
Yeah, but aren't we asking that one individual to bear the cost of doing it for everybody else?
Through the mayor, yes.
Initially, but he was offered a cost recovery agreement where the latecomers would pay back to him. Correct?
Yes, that's correct.
But at this point, there's no indication that that's going to happen. Correct?
Through the mayor, no, we haven't received any applications in the area.
Are there, and maybe this is a question for Bruce, like, is there even someone living on the lot down the line? My recollection from the fellow's presentation is that he's pretty much like the only guy that, like, there's nobody else that even could come in at this point, as there's no house further on down the line. Am I remembering that incorrectly?
Mr. Lawrence?
Thank you. I would like to add just a little bit of context. So whenever we're looking at municipal infrastructure, it's important for the municipality to consider all the outcomes and the best way to manage that infrastructure. And it's important to look at the requests being presented by applicants, but it's also up to the municipality to review those and in the context of the best move for the municipality as a whole. So at this stage, we're talking about putting a flush valve in the middle of a line or at the end of the line. Now, the end of the line has an existing standpipe that the flush valve would sit on top. So there wouldn't be any excavation minimal excavation that would be required at the end of the line. The applicant would actually have to excavate and attach a new standpipe and flush valve in where his preferred location. So the primary issue that we're facing with this one, to do it right once, is is it going to go in the middle or is it going to go at the end? If we put it at the end, it does require a permit because it goes into a fish-bearing stream. If it goes in the middle, it doesn't. But if any new application comes forward, we'll have to move that flush valve to the next property, to the next property, to the next property. So now we're creating a cost that is spread out over every single application unless the next one agrees and says, no, we'll put it at the end. So we're responsible as the organization for the oversight of that permit. The applicant is only responsible for making the application and if there's any costs there at the original time of that. And this would be true to any new subdivision, new service to our infrastructure. So we're not asking this individual to do anything that would be unique to any other service connection. We always take a look at it as how do we connect this property to our system so that we do it correct once and we do it safely. So it's a matter of, yes, we could put it in the middle, but it is discharging the middle of a line rather than the end of the line, and that creates some risk and a guarantee of additional costs in the future. It's not whether or not it'll be a time when they'll tap into that property. It's when will that occur. So the cost is actually quite marginal, aside from a permit application and the possibility of some additional work that needs to be completed, that we're not even certain if there's any additional work that is required. So at this time, the recommendation from staff is do best practice, right? And do what is best for the entirety of that system, not just one piece of it.
And a quick question, the cost to this applicant, whether it's the flush valve is installed in front of his property or at the end, the cost is probably about the same. Is that right?
Through the mayor, so I haven't estimated all the costs on behalf of the applicant, so I don't have those available.
We can assume it would be similar. If not even less expensive to do it where the stand already exists.
Through the mayor, so it's all it's really the Ministry of Environment and Department of Fisheries would inform on the application, and that would trigger those expenses. So that's what the applicant I believe is trying to avoid.
Is the permits from the Ministry of the Environment?
Is the permits from the ministries and the unknown costs of going through that process.
Any other questions from council?
More of a response to that. I think one of the main concerns is the length of time for those permits, and the applicant's trying to subdivide this land, which is another housing unit that we desperately need. And I don't think that. Well, I guess that's a point for discussion after the vote. But I'll just leave it at that. I think it's a time issue because the permitting could take months.
I think that is one of the issues. Yes. Councillor Mafty?
I don't want to get fixated on this, but I'm just wondering if I can get some clarification as to whether there are currently houses down the line from the applicant.
Through the mayor, so certainly there are current homes on Thornton Road, and so who knows? At some point, those homes could be developed more, or those properties could be developed more. There's certainly land that's adjacent to Port Albion Road and in between Thornton Road. There's lands owned east of the junction at Thornton Road and Port Albion Road. Part of that is owned by Mosaic Forest. Who knows what's going to happen with that in the future? So
I'm just trying to get an idea of like whether there's actually a house that's occupied that has running water that could come to us in the next year, or whether it's a hypothetical that yes, there is land that could be purchased or developed by somebody at some point in the future. Like I'm just trying to gauge how likely it is that we would slow this guy down to account for houses that already exist, that already have running water, that already want to use the same pipe, versus houses that could theoretically, once constructed, do that. Because those are two different things in my mind.
I guess the question is, are there homes nearby that could tap into this water supply?
Yeah, like in theory, are there homes that someone could come to us next month with an application? Like, is there? I can't remember in my mind's eye the schematic that the applicant showed us, but my recollection is that he was sort of the last property down the line, not the last property, but the last home, the last house down the line, and it was unoccupied land to the end of the line from him. And I just don't remember if that's correct or not, and that's what I'm trying to figure out. Is he the last house, or are there others?
I think Mr. Lawrence is just pulling up the drawing that the applicant submitted when he was a delegation. So just give us a moment.
Thank you. Sorry to harp on this.
I'm just bringing up Google Earth, but I'm unable to answer that. I'm not sure if there's houses that would be, but if there's on, say, Thornton Road that wanted to connect to it, I guess they could tap into it. There is the BC Hydro building, but they have a separate water line, a 3/4 inch, I believe, that they already use, so they wouldn't need to tap into the larger line. But I can't say for certain if there's any other properties that are already in existence there.
Okay. Thank you for checking. I appreciate that.
Any other comments from council?
Comments? So the applicant is willing to pay for this work, is what I'm understanding, and it would not require any environmental permits. So, I mean, from where I'm sitting, I can't understand really why not. As Councillor Mafty has said, when the houses eventually end up down the road, well, that's almost a case of buyer beware. In that case, they would need to know what the water line situation was. But sometimes I feel that we're not really helping people. Like sometimes there is a path of least resistance, and for me to say that we can make him take it to where he would need environmental permits as opposed to dumping it in a ditch where it doesn't. Maybe we ask for a QEP report on the effects of that, but I don't know why we would forcefully take it down to an environmentally sensitive area to dump it. It doesn't make sense to me.
I'm going to have a follow-up comment on that. Because if it's dumping into the ditch and the ditch is dumping into the harbor, and we're talking about chlorinated water, that could potentially have an effect down the line, right? And so I don't like saying that we wouldn't that we would allow the applicant to do this, not requiring an environmental assessment of it. I would like to see a QEP
right.
have a look at this ditch. What are we talking on the effects of this water flush into the harbor, on the critters that are in the harbor, and at that end of the harbor, he's close to the hatchery, so we're talking about like baby fish. Mm-hmm. We all know that they're all under a lot of pressure from temperature and climate change and stuff these days, and so hitting them with chlorine may not be what should happen. I would need more information than this.
To that point, and I agree with you, and I think we're saying the same thing, is like subject to a QEP on the location that he's asking for. But if it comes back that dumping this chlorinated water in the ditch to filter down through a bioswale to where it would eventually end up in the harbor, as opposed to dumping it right into the harbor right away from the district proposed flush valve. I mean, it can't be worse than that. But again, that's for QEP to tell us, because I'm not that.
But I think it was mentioned that it would have to be dechlorinated at the end if it was done properly that way.
And potentially a QEP would say the same thing at his area, because at the end of the day, we want fresh water, potable water for a local resident, and we want to protect the environment. So if we can check those boxes, then I think that's where we should go.
I do totally understand I'm not sorry, through the mayor. I understand that it is always best to do the best thing for the district, and I get that might be putting it at the end, but yeah, into a riparian area. So there is the piece of me that's like, well, if we had the information from a QEP about the spot that he's proposing for this auto flush, it might be a buyer beware for down the line in the future for people in that area, but I just don't feel like I have enough information at this point to make a decision.
Okay. Does someone might want to make a motion?
But before we
Oh,
get, it seems like
Councillor
we've sort
Mafty.
of done it backwards and had the discussion before the vote, and I feel like just to have that continuity, I share Councillor Hoare's concerns. I'm not a water chemist at all, but my somewhat informed impression is that I don't know how much of a risk it is, considering how much chlorinated water ends up going directly into the harbor through storm drains and stuff. Like I know, and I mean, anytime you're like running your hose, people wash their car, rinse their boat, whatever, like all that water ends up in a storm drain and ends up going into the harbor all the time. And so I'm certainly not advocating for pumping chlorinated water, but that's where it all goes anyway. And I think, if I remember the applicant's explanation, and he did have quite a detailed little package that he showed us via PowerPoint, it's going into a ditch where I do think that the impact would actually be less than pumping it into the fish-bearing stream, which was his argument to begin with. To that end, one of my concerns with having him deal with the DFO permits is DFO might ultimately not give him those permits, and then we're right back to square one. Certainly, if someone were to ask me, well, where would you rather I run this water, straight into the river or into the ditch? Personally, I'd go for the ditch. So I agree that a QEP might be in order, but that sounds like something that's a lot more reasonable to ask the applicant. That's something that can be done pretty quickly, pretty locally at minimal cost. And I think we're all feeling that the permitting might be a significant hurdle for him. So that's just my 2 cents, but I wanted to mention that before we vote, or before we move.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson?
Is that I'm right in the middle. It's stuff I hear both Councillor Hoare and Councillor Kennington and Councillor Mafty's. Yeah, so is it possible to recommend a QEP at this point to see if the idea of putting it into the ditch is viable and it's going to cause a problem? I mean, I agree that's something that we have to, like, it in all good conscience, you can't do something like this when there's Thornton Creek Hatchery right there. But on the other hand, I don't want to make this guy jump through a ton of hoops, for no reason either. So I don't. Is there a possibility of doing a QEP or having a QEP done, like to ask the proponent to do this?
Look to Mr. Lawrence for that.
I was actually going to defer that one to our Director of Engineering. He
Okay.
knows that system better than I.
Through the mayor, so we could certainly make it a condition of his proposed application.
All right, so that would be neither A nor B, but some sort of combination of them.
Can we slide that condition into A? Can we reword A and say something like, pending approval or I'll leave it to someone else to come up with the wording, but can we just modify A?
Mr. Rotenberg?
I think you mean B.
I think the best approach here may be to
Yeah, sorry.
So B.
B, he means.
A modification of B.
Yeah.
I think one approach here would be to refer the matter back to staff and then have the QEP provided as part of a report on this matter. I'll allow, I'd invite the CAO to step in, see what he thinks.
Yeah, the one thing I'm thinking in that is we could refer it back. Council could refer it back to staff for staff to work with the applicant to. There's two things coming through running through my mind. Is one is that we could do the assessment because although there's a lot of discussion around the chlorine going into the stream, and that could be a long process, there could and result in a cost for the applicant. At the same time, they might say, yep, go for it, it's all good, with no additional requirements, and it would be placed in the best interest of everybody at a minimal cost. It could come back saying, hey, no, you need to do X, Y, and Z, and at that point in time, we could consider adjustments to the application. I understand council's desire to also the discussion around timing of it, because we don't know how long that application process would take if it went to DFO. The other one is just refer back to staff to facilitate the installation as requested.
Pending a QEP.
Pending the result of a QEP. And then it wouldn't need to come back. So if the QEP says, no, there's no issues, then it wouldn't need to come back and delay the application further. If there were issues, then staff would bring it back.
Okay, so I will make a motion to refer this back to staff to work with the applicant and to request a QEP.
I think Joey has a motion that will cover off all the aspects of it. If just give us one moment, please.
Got it.
We just never make it easy.
Well, I guess it's better than just like willy-nilly making decisions left, right, and center. And at least this way, there's a clear trail.
No, it's been a great discussion, actually.
I mean, I totally understand what Mr. McIntosh and Mr. Lawrence have said. I feel maybe it's like that last little libertarian bone in me, but I don't want to shaft this guy with the responsibility of doing something that, like, all he wants is to just run water to his house, which he's allowed to do. But because of where it is, it seems like we're asking him to jump through some other hoops. And yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting one. I totally get it. Like, I get the arguments in favor of putting the valve at the end. It logically makes sense, and I think that's what would be an ideal situation. But I don't know how I feel about deciding that for this guy.
Yeah, I think it's the length of time those permits are going to take that would drastically delay his new build.
Yeah. Assuming he even gets them.
Yeah, that's the other part of it, the potential cost and time involved.
I feel like this is also one of those situations where it's an interesting relationship between us and the ACRD, because I mean, in was it number 5 of the conditions here that said the district isn't currently allocating capital towards the water line in the ACRD area C to expand, upgrade, etc. But we also have a commitment to provide water in this case, so it's a bit of a conundrum.
Well, the applicant's paying for it, so it's not a financial burden to us.
But we're also responsible to have clean, fresh, safe water, because if it's not done properly, then
It's contaminated.
Yeah.
If we don't do it at all,
it's
because he can't do it, then we're not providing safe, clean water.
Welcome to the horns of a dilemma.
I love it.
Would you like me to put it up?
Yes, please.
Just give me a second. I'm going to have to put it up and then I'm going to share it on Zoom so Councillor Matthew can see it.
Oh, okay, great. All right, would someone like to make that motion?
I've got it. I will move that council refer this matter back to staff to work with the applicant to install the service connection at the desired location, subject to a positive recommendation of a qualified environmental professional.
Do I have a seconder before we discuss?
second.
Councillor Mafty seconds.
What you got?
Which I got. The desired location. Whose desired location? Because we have two desired locations
the-
here.
Oh,
For applicants, yeah.
The applicant's desired location.
So let's make an amendment. We have a motion on the floor. Make a motion to amend.
Okay. I'll make a motion to amend the motion that council refer this matter back to staff to work with the applicant to install the service connection at the applicant's desired location, subject to a positive recommendation of a qualified environmental professional.
I will second that.
Okay, now we need to vote on the amendment first.
All right, all in favor? I can't see. Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
Councillor
yeah.
Mafty. Okay. None opposed? That carries.
Now, would you like me to add those words to the resolution so you can vote on that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's do it. 1 second.
Don't you love process?
It is. It's kind of fun.
It is kind of fun, huh?
Yeah.
Mark's like, oh, I should have come to council chambers today.
Oh, I'm just so glad I can do this over Zoom. I mean, this is like some pretty nerdy stuff, but yeah, this is this is what I like the most.
We're all just a bunch of nerds here. Welcome to the club.
1 second, let me just share it on Zoom. Okay, so I've updated the motion. I believe this is I've added the words. The main motion is back on the table, as amended.
Go for it.
Well, it doesn't need to be removed because it's just been amended, so it's already on the floor.
So we have to just vote on it.
Or discuss
Exactly. You're back to the
anything
main
else.
motion as amended. Now it's time, if you'd like, to vote on the main motion.
Okay. All in favor? Any opposed? And that carries.
Thank you.
That one report was took some time. Are there any notices of motion?
We never give notice of motion. We're always making Joey write them up on the fly because we love him so much. Just saying.
Okay, correspondence. We have 5 correspondence items. Would council like to bring forward any of the items for discussion?
I would like to bring 10.2 forward.
10.2.
That's the youth parliament, and I just want to make sure that Mr. Nixon or whoever is doing the civics course at the high school has this information. So if we can get it forwarded to USS.
That was my note on my agenda as well. I don't think we need a motion, do we? We can just forward it to USS. Okay. And 10.3, similar thing, forward it to USS. in case they want a presentation. And 10.5, that was just to make sure that the two students that received the scholarships actually are getting those scholarships. So that was Owen Rhodes and
Hudson Swan.
Hudson Swan. They missed putting his name in the letter, actually. And we have two information items. 11.1, that was that late item. The ACRD launching a solid waste survey with movie night for the public. The screening is Tuesday, October 17th from 6 till 8 at Shars Landing in Port Alberni. So if you happen to be in Port Alberni, it looks like it'd be a great movie to catch. And 11.2 is the monthly policing report from Sergeant Jones. Council committee reports. Councillor Anderson.
All right, I'll try and be quick here. So I am in the middle of trying to connect with Dr. Kerr. When we sat down at the UBCM for the final dinner that we had that night, remember we got sat beside the Comox group there? Yeah. So they were a really interesting bunch. I ended up, the fellow I talked to beside me, I was explaining some of the challenges we were having here. So he put me in touch with Dr. Kerr from the Comox Valley Family Physician Recruitment and Retention Task Force. So that's an interesting kind of dialogue that we have going right now to see if maybe we can do something like this. We'll see how things go with upcoming developments with the medical center. At the UBCM, I forgot to mention that I met with Stephanie Carr, who's from that Lane Light Traffic Technologies. I think she was in town. I don't know if she met. That was just more in the idea that we're throwing out, like a few people in town have contacted me about the potential of when we redo Peninsula for the upgrades. There's a couple, at least one or two pedestrian crosswalks that could potentially use an extra light. There was a couple of near misses in the summer, I guess. So she reached out. I actually missed her when she was in town, but I think she contacted the district. The other one was the Municipal Protected Areas project, the MPAP. That was like two hours, I believe. I think Mr. Togood was on that as well. So that's the idea of having biological conservation in like protected areas within a municipality, and they help with that. So John had a pretty interesting question at the end, and we both filled out a survey. So they're going to come here, I think, November 7th or 9th. He has to decide what if any of those work for him. But yeah, this is pretty interesting. Talk with the people were really engaged on that. I signed up for that Decolonize First Nachalnath Online Community Learning Circle with the that's done with the ACHN, the Alberta Clackwood Health Network. So I signed up for the later one, which is in November, December. It's like 4 sessions, I believe, that are about 2.5 hours long. And those are November 16th, 23rd, 30th, and December 7th, 9:30 a.m. to 12 p.m. If anyone else is interested in that. And then the other thing was I got to meet with the medical health officer for Central and North Island, which was Dr. Charmaine Enns. I met with her at the district office, and yeah, that was an awesome meeting. She's such a interesting person, and yeah, we had a great conversation just about public health, and you know, I just posed the question to her. I said, if you were a counselor, if you were me, what would you do? you know, with and well, she had a list, but she had a couple of really good things, and yeah, it was really eye opening to talk to her and kind of get a feel. There were some things that you know we wanted to bring up with Adrienne Dix, our health minister, so I got to bounce those off her, and she was great. So that's a conversation in progress. So we decided we're just going to keep meeting and talk about these things. So yeah, that was great. But that's it for me.
Great, thank you. And I guess when Stephanie Carr was in town, she dropped this in my box.
Yes.
So you can forward that on to staff if you like.
Sure.
Councillor Hoare.
Well, my Wild Pacific Trail meeting was canceled, so I didn't do that one. But I did attend the Truth and Reconciliation Day exhibit at the secondary school that was done in company with the Legacy of Hope Foundation, and it was amazing. So if you guys missed it, better put it on your calendars for next year, because I dragged Sean and we got kicked out after 2.5 hours because it was past the time. There's a lot of information up, and the projects that they do with the students are really, really well worth seeing.
There's another chance to catch it at the Tofino Tourism Visitor Center on Friday the 13th.
Yeah, so places to go up the road. And I got an invitation, I don't know if you guys did, from the North Island College for a working lunch in November. So I'll probably do that. I did their last one, so it was quite interesting. But yeah, other than that, it's been quiet.
Great.
But I will leave you with, because I had no voice last time, so I leave you with a quote from my collection from UBCM, is that if you can't be good, be great.
That was the keynote speaker, right? Yes, that was a good one. Awesome. Councillor Kennington.
Just had a accessibility committee meeting last week, and it's moving along. I know I say that every time, but it is moving along. And used the information from the accessibility tour at UBCM and handed out those notes, and we sort of restructured things to use the sort of the key categories used for getting financing to sort of craft the report around that, to sort of streamline maybe just making least resistance for grant applications. So we will be done before anyone else, I think.
Great.
That's it.
Nice work.
Yeah, awesome. How was that walking tour?
It was cold, and I got very sick, but other than that, it was good.
And wet. It was wet.
It was cold and it was wet. Yeah, and a lot of the exhibits were outside, unnecessarily standing in the rain.
Of course.
But yeah, no, it was interesting, and some of the things that they came up with to show us is things you would never think of, like the contrast of lettering on backgrounds for signs, and you know, there's so many disabilities that you don't think of, and when it's your task to come up with a strategy, you really have to sort of get out there and see what disabilities are there and what we take for granted. So really interesting.
And walk in their shoes for a little while. Perfect.
I actually took some of the information from that tour and passed it along to the gang here for Yuki Days from the Canucks Autism Network. Yeah. That whole idea of having quiet space, somewhere where people can just step away from some of the noise and the lights and the crazy. So, because I know there are a number of kids in our community who were attending, for instance, Yuki Days last year, and with noise canceling headphones and things like that, because they have issues with some of these things. But they still want to partake, so giving them a spot where they can be quiet and take a break is not a bad thing. So
Interesting. Councillor Mefti.
Little to report. Looking ahead on the 18th, I'm going to attend the Clackawank Biosphere Trust's regional forum, which is basically a whole bunch of different stakeholders and knowledge holders all gathered together. I presume we're going to discuss their I think what's about a final draft of their next vital signs report as well. So I'm looking forward to that in a week, and I'll be able to report on it at the next meeting.
Great, thank you. We're all looking forward to the vital signs report. It's the last one was 2019, so it'll be a good read, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. For myself, September 27th, I attended a Tourism Ucluelet meeting. They have a visitor services task force to figure out what to do with the Pacific Rim Visitor Center, whether it's needed at all. Has visitor services morphed into something where people just look at their iPhones? Does there need to be a building there at all? So anyway, they sent out some surveys to stakeholders and got 61 responses. 48 were from Ucluelet, and they didn't give us the results of that, but it's sort of an ongoing task force to figure out whether they really need a visitor services center at the junction. And we haven't had one in town for many years as well. So that's part of the survey. Do we need something in town, like a kiosk or something that gives information to visitors?
Question about that.
Yeah.
I mean, so 2/3 of the responses were from here, where we don't have a visitor center, but the junction one is kind of close to where we are, as opposed to Tofino, where they have the Tourism Tofino site in town, more or less in town.
And they have a kiosk
And-
even further in town.
Yeah.
Right downtown.
So it seemed interesting that everybody seemed to be engaged from down here.
From down here, that's right. So I'll keep everyone updated on that. 4VI, which used to be called Tourism Vancouver Island, is holding a November industry session here in Ucluelet, November 30th from 4 to 7 here at the UCC. And Minister Lana Popham will be here as well for that. So that I'm going to attend that. That's going to be really interesting. I think those were the key points from my TU meeting. September 27th in the afternoon, I went to the attended the ACRD meeting by Zoom. Nothing really of consequence for us. September 29th, I went to the raising of the survivors flag at our municipal office, as did Councillor Hoare and Councillor Kennington and Shorty. It's a beautiful flag. I think it's going to be up for the remainder of the month. Is that correct, Mr. Lawrence?
We had only planned for it for the week.
The week, okay, great. It's a beautiful flag. If you go on the district's Facebook page, there is an image of it with a story of how it was designed. It's an expression of remembrance meant to honor residential school survivors and all the lives and communities impacted by the residential school system in Canada. Each element depicted on the flag was carefully selected by survivors from across Canada who were consulted in the flag's creation. It's a beautiful story if you get a chance to look at it. October 4th, I attended the West Coast Committee meeting. That's part of the ACRD, but it's strictly West Coast. And I love those meetings because everything involves the West Coast and not Port Alberni. They had the results of the 2023 tipping fee review for the West Coast landfill. So those rates are going up slightly. There was a motion for a permanent vehicle parking fee system at the Long Beach Airport. That's following a 1-year pilot program. So what they did was they took the Tofino parking rates and just mimicked them at the airport, and found that, well, they used Robbins for the parking services, which is a costly service. But the months of April to October, the pilot program generated a fair bit of revenue. Whereas in the winter months, because the airport is not used as often, of course, they lost money. But overall, for that 1-year pilot project, I believe they got $1,200 was the total revenue they got. And they're thinking that will just go up. And then the West Coast Transit that's due to begin here on the coast. It's now been pushed to mid-January. There was a motion for the service level and scheduling costing. And the vote was actually for the high service level, which does cost more than the low or the medium service level, but we all but one of us felt that ridership was really crucial to make this a service that's viable for the West Coast, and so the higher level service provides more buses and weekend use as well, not just weekday. So there is a tax implication for that that will be shared between Tofino, Ucluelet, Area C, Ucluelet, and Toquat. And that was that meeting. And I think that's it for me. Any questions? No questions for me? All right, we'll go on to question period. This is an opportunity for the public to ask questions about matters within Council's jurisdiction. Representations about matters that have been the subject of a public hearing are not permitted at this time. Are there any questions from the audience? Seeing none, are there any questions by Zoom or telephone, Mr. Rotenberg?
There are no hands raised on Zoom or by telephone at this time.
And have we received any mail through communityinput@ucluelet.ca?
There are no questions in our community input box right now.
All right, this regular council meeting is adjourned at 5:50 p.m. All in favor?